Good morning, afternoon and evening, ni hao, and welcome to my channel. This is Geopolitics, and today we will be discussing China's geopolitical reality. China was one of the wealthiest and most powerful nations in human history. For many centuries, the many dynasties that have ruled over China in its 4,000-year history found themselves being a center of culture, science, wealth, and influence in Asia and indeed the world at large. The world has changed dramatically since these glory days of empire, however. Since the Opium Wars in the late 19th century, China found itself being dominated by foreign powers and has been playing catch-up for over a century. China today may find itself once again being center stage in international affairs due to its economic and political influence, but unfortunately, even more so due to COVID-19, human rights abuses in Xinjiang and indeed across China, and the untimely border skirmishes with India. The Middle Kingdom is now once more in the middle, but not in the way China may have planned. Due to these extreme circumstances, the interest in China and how it functions as a state has peaked. Not only are most states in the world observing every step China takes, but the average person has also taken great interest in Chinese politics and the great nation's actions. In this video, I plan to explain China's geopolitical reality and how the Chinese have behaved on the world stage. Before this, however, I will briefly outline modern China's situation. The People's Republic of China, as it currently stands under the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is a rather young state, as the PRC came into power in 1949 when it defeated its predecessor, the Republic of China, in a communist revolution. The current regime has only ruled for 71 years, and yet it has gone through dramatic changes during this time. China went from a relatively backwards region throughout the 20th century, especially when compared to the Western world and even the Soviets, to becoming the second largest economy in nominal GDP and the wealthiest in GDP by purchasing power parity on the planet. China from 1993 to 2005 alone had an economic growth of well over 10% on average, making it one of the fastest growing economies on the planet for over a decade. This growth has not stagnated either, and continues to be well above the global average, even with COVID-19 taking its toll on the global economy. Not only has the economic miracle worked well for the state, but over 850 million Chinese have also been uplifted from extreme poverty, the rate going from 88% in 1981 to only 0.7% in 2015. This still means that China has millions of people in extreme poverty, primarily in its rural regions. In 2019, people living under China's national poverty line still numbered at around 5.5 million, with the aim being to cut this down to 0 by 2021. One should take into consideration China today is home to almost 1.4 billion people, making it the most populated nation on the planet. What the state has achieved in the past few decades is, by all intents and purposes, a miracle, or better yet, an economic effort unrivaled in history. Not only is China extremely rich and overpopulated, it is also the third largest nation. Its exclusive economic zone, however, is extremely small comparatively. Even though China has a large landmass, most of its population is on its coastal provinces, and due to this fact, the economy of the nation is very much centered around its coastal cities, such as Shanghai. The divide between the inland provinces and the coastal regions is extreme. China's 5 largest provinces, Inner Mongolia, Tibet, Xinjiang, Qinghai, and Gansu, make up 54% of China's landmass, yet only 6% of its overall population. The Chinese tend to use the Haihe Tongchong line, also known as the Huhuanyong line, which is another good way to divide the nation. This line divides the nation into 2 roughly equal parts and shows the difference between the northwest and the southeast rather well, with the western side of the line holding 57% of the nation's area but only 6% of the population, as opposed to the east, holding 43% of the area but 94% of the population. Economically speaking, Coastal provinces are far wealthier too, with Guangdong, Jiangsu and Shandong being the wealthiest of all, whereas the landlocked Tibet, Qinghai and Ningxia provinces being the poorest. However, being a landlocked province does not automatically mean less wealth. Provinces such as Sichuan, Hubei and Henan are also wealthy. The key difference here is access to water, industrial capacity and agricultural production, which will be spoken more in depth in the next section. China is, as stated previously, a vast nation. This means that China's geography is extremely diverse and changes dramatically from west to east, south to north. Traditionally, China is divided into 3 regions based on geography: the Eastern region, Western region, and Central region. I would argue China is divided into 3 sections: the coast, the heartland, and the periphery. We have already established that the coastal regions are far wealthier and more populated than China's inland, landlocked provinces, with a few exceptions. In this part of the video, we will discuss how China's geographic reality impacts how China is organized politically and economically, as well as understanding the military strategy China must implement to protect itself, and if need be, launch invasions of its own. I will also mention territorial disputes that China faces with its neighbors. First of all, let us analyze China's coastal regions. The coastal regions of nations tend to be the wealthiest on an almost universal level. This is because of maritime trade, which makes up most of the global trade. China specifically relies on over 60% of its exports and imports going through the South China Sea, as well as a total of 80% of its energy imports. Coastal provinces in China also hold almost half of the nation's population, with roughly 600 million residents. It is therefore the coastal regions in China that are the wealthiest and most important to China's economy and indeed political structure. These regions, however, are also the most in danger from invasion. As history shows, European powers came to dominate China by dominating its coastal regions first. Japan began its invasion of China first through Manchuria, but immediately after by sea into China's rich coastal cities. This has forced the Chinese to focus ever more on their naval forces, an attempt to extend their control over the South China Sea by building artificial islands. Not only will this expand China's maritime territory, which it lacks for a nation of its size and importance, it will bolster Chinese military defense if there is a war. The Chinese Navy already outnumbers the United States, the current global hegemon, in terms of quantity of ships, with 355 ships in comparison to the Americans' 293. However, closer inspection reveals that China outnumbers the United States due to the many smaller coastal and patrol ships they have. The Americans still have superior and more advanced ocean-going ships, including carriers and nuclear submarines. After all, US strategy dictates that the US Navy must be a tool for power projection. For this to work, the US relies heavily on its carriers. To say that the Navy is vital for China is an understatement. After all, if an opposing force dominates China at sea, not only can it cut up to 60% of China's trade, said enemy can decimate China's coastal regions, as well as the rest of the nation, by starving it of energy. This means that the most important part of China is also potentially the hardest to defend, ending up being China's strength and weakness simultaneously. Coastal cities such as Shanghai, Dalian, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong are all major cities that China relies on economically, not to mention the amount of investment these cities receive. These cities are seen by the world, and indeed in China itself, as symbols of economic prosperity and progress. The heartland of China is also vital, especially in regions where the Yangtze River flows. This heartland consists of regions such as Hubei, Anhui, and Sichuan, each with access to the great river that flows to the wealthiest of all Chinese cities, Shanghai. This connection to the coast is the primary reason why these provinces are also wealthy. Wuhan, Chengdu, and Chongqing are all heavily industrialized due to the Yangtze. The Yangtze not only allows for large industrialized cities to prosper and send their goods downriver to Shanghai, but it also allows for agriculture to flourish. After all, China is one of the most agriculturally productive nations on the planet. This is not only due to the Yangtze, but also the Yellow River in the north that supplies Xi'an and Zhangjiao, as well as supplying much of the periphery, and the Pearl River in the south that supplies many cities across Sichuan and Guangdong. This allows China to be both an industrial and agricultural powerhouse at the same time, all due to this extremely fertile heartland. Due to this fact, China is the leading producer of many agricultural goods, including potatoes, wheat, rice, apples, tomatoes, and even grapes, as well as many other food products, including meat products such as pork. When it comes to defending these lands, if the worst should happen, China may find it difficult to do so, as these regions tend to be quite flat for the most part. However, the region is surrounded by hilly mountainous terrain, especially to the northwest and northeast, as well as the southwest in the periphery. In other words, the heartland of China is geographically protected by the peripheral regions. The periphery itself tends to be far poorer, specifically the northwestern provinces of Tibet, Xinjiang, and Gansu. This is mostly due to its geography, but also partially due to its non-Han Chinese ethnic groups that simply do not get as much attention as the Han themselves. One would be hard-pressed to find a Tibetan, Uyghur, or Mongol in the CCP leadership. However, it is geography, first and foremost, that makes these regions far poorer. Due to a combination of lack of water, fertile soil, and an abundance of hilly, mountainous terrain, these regions will never be able to keep up with the Chinese heartland or coastal regions. In fact, they never have, historically. This does not mean these provinces are unimportant, however. Tibet especially is perhaps one of the most important provinces for China. This is because many rivers that extend down into China, Southeast Asia, and even South Asia begin in Tibet. This includes the Yangtze, Salween, Mekong, Yellow River, and the almighty Indus River. Not only does this give China an upper hand over the rest of its neighbours in terms of water control, but it also gives it a vast advantage in the future, when water will be vital for any economic system to prosper. China's control over these rivers has already worried many of its neighbours, including states in Southeast Asia such as Vietnam. Tibet is also a natural barrier that can be used against the only other major threat to China within Asia, India. For Indian forces to go through Tibet would simply be suicidal due to the mountainous terrain. China even claims that Arunachal Pradesh, a region within India, is actually part of southern Tibet, and therefore part of China. If China was to gain control over this region, it would make Tibet even harder to invade, although this is unlikely to happen. The vast expanses in Xinjiang will also be difficult to traverse. Both the terrain and the lack of infrastructure will make it difficult for any invading force. Arguably, this does go both ways. It would be difficult to enter China from these northern regions, but China itself would find it difficult to launch an invasion from here. You then have Inner Mongolia, a moderately wealthy province even when compared to provinces in the heartland and coasts. The province itself borders Mongolia, a state that poses no threat to China. To the northeast, we find Heilongjiang, bordering Russia. This province was in the past far more important than today. The reason for its decline in importance is primarily due to political and economic decisions, as the flow of wealth began going towards the coast as China developed over the years. The province's past and current prosperity is due to its abundance of natural resources, including oil, coal, lumber, and the fact the Amur River has many tributaries that run within the province, making it far more fertile than other regions in the periphery. This province is also militarily strategic and a gateway into China, or into Russia, should war occur. Luckily for China, the mountainous region of the province borders Russia, creating a natural border or natural wall if the worst comes to pass. To the southwest, we have Yunnan, a province that borders the Southeast Asian states of Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam. The province itself is rather mountainous, much like its neighbouring province of Tibet, as well as heavily forested areas. Due to this fact, it also acts almost like a wall against Southeast Asia, which protects the prosperous heartlands of China. China, as an enormous nation with a very long history, has inevitably come into territorial disputes with many of their neighbours. The most popular and most important of these disputes are the Diaoyu or Senkaku Islands and the Sino-Indian borders in two different locations, the Aksai Chin region and the Arunachal Pradesh. The Diaoyu Islands are claimed by China due to the fact they were part of China before the First Sino-Japanese War, and even though Japan gave practically all of its conquered territory back to China, these islands were left out of the agreement. Both nations claim these islands, although Japan has the support of the international community. If China could gain control of these islands, it would extend its control over the East China Sea. This is a sea that is not as vital as the South China Sea, but of course possession over these islands would increase Chinese power and influence in the region, pushing Japan back along with their allies, the Americans. The Sino-Indian borders are far more complicated. To the north, China controls the Aksai Chin region, which India claims as part of its land. It is here that the recent China-India skirmishes took place. To the south, just below Tibet, we find the Arunachal Pradesh region, an area which China claims to be part of Tibet and by extension, a part of China. Both regions are highly strategic, both militarily and economically. The Arunachal Pradesh would strengthen Chinese control over Tibet and lower the chances of an Indian invasion even more. The Aksai Chin region is important as it can be used as an entrance into India, and its proximity to Pakistan, a nation allied to China, increases its value militarily and economically. China overall is positioned in such a way that it can potentially dominate its surroundings with ease. The fertility of its land, amount of water and defensive natural barriers make China extremely powerful. However, its major weakness in the 21st century, and perhaps throughout the modern era, is its limited access to the sea. The South China Sea is essential for China's prosperity and future. Without complete control of the sea, China can never truly feel secure. Well guys, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please do leave a comment below on how I can improve, as I'm new to all of this. Also guys, check out my blog down below on the information section. Anyway, the second part will be out soon. See you there, and of course, like and subscribe.